The title is the topic. Today I felt like doing a rundown of Jonathan McIntosh. First, I'll talk about technicalities. One thing he likes to do is word his arguments in such a way that he gets what he wants, but you can't technically accuse him of what he is actually doing. An example I'll give you is his understanding of copyright laws.
So I just want to give you all familiar with fair use and how it works. I just want to give you a quick overview of this because I think it's important to what I do especially. So part of the legal doctrine, Section 107 of U.S. copyright law, says that there are exceptions to copyright.
He doesn't want to be accused of stealing other people's work, so he does things in such a way under copyright law that you can't accuse him of stealing, so he gets his way. The man is too lazy to create his own material, so he likes to take other people's pre-existing content and remix it.
Studied extensively.
You see this in the tropes versus women in video games. I said in my damsel in distress reviews that the arguments are set up in such a way to get rid of the damsel in distress trope, but then they slip these lines in.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying that all games that use the damsel in distress as a plot device are automatically sexist or have no value. Of course, there is absolutely nothing wrong with offering or occasionally needing assistance.
With those lines, you cannot technically accuse them of wanting to get rid of the damsel in distress. But the reality is, if you follow all their arguments, it would in fact disappear in its traditional sense. Narratives.
People more and more are taking those stories and saying, this is a story that was given to me, on the TV or in the movies or on the radio, and it's not quite what I want. It doesn't work for me. So I'm going to change that story a little bit. I'm going to add something to it. I'm going to take something away from it. I'm going to create a new narrative based on what I'm missing.
He likes to take and remix things in such a way to push a narrative. One example would be his Donald Duck video. That was set up in such a way to frame Glenn Beck the way McIntosh views him. I'm not going to give my opinion on Glenn Beck, but that is what McIntosh does. McIntosh does it with remix video so he can subconsciously communicate his message without saying it outright. He uses carefully constructed arguments and hand-picked words to reinforce his view into your mind. In Tropes versus Women, an example would be the way they define the damsel in distress.
Let's take a quick moment to clear up some common misconceptions about this trope. As a plot device, the damsel in distress is often grouped with other separate tropes, including the designated victim, the heroic rescue, and the smooch of victory. However, it's important to remember that these associated conventions are not necessarily a part of the damsel in distress trope itself. So the woman in question may or may not play the victim role for the entire game or series, while our brave hero may or may not be successful in his rescue attempt. All that is really required to fulfill the damsel in distress trope is for a female character to be reduced to a state of helplessness from which she requires rescuing by a typically male hero for the benefit of his story arc.
With that narrative, it alters the traditional vision of the damsel in distress so they can call whatever they want a damsel.
So I'm going to change that story a little bit.
And by separating the conventional associations, they can keep their definition of the damsel while eliminating whatever they want.
I'm going to take something away from it.
Another part of the narrative is combining things. They add something to it,
which I call the damsel in the refrigerator. I like to call this happy little gem the euthanized damsel.
That is not the traditional damsel. But because they redefined what a damsel in distress is, they can then change the associations to whatever they want.
I'm going to add something to it.
By focusing on damsels that die, instead of ones that are rescued, they frame the damsel in distress trope as seeming worse than it actually is.
I'm going to create a new narrative based on what I'm missing.
Broad claims. He likes to use language to make things seem like a big issue.
This project will examine the tropes, plot devices, and patterns most commonly associated with women in gaming from a systemic, big-picture perspective.
By wording it that way, in your mind, it seems like an issue that needs to be dealt with. I hammered their numbers for months, demonstrating they never proved these to be big-picture systemic issues. But with the wide sweeping claims, he can convince you it is an issue with the lack of numbers.
Okay, so we've established that the damsel in distress trope is one of the most widely used gendered cliches in the history of video games.
This makes it sound like a massive issue. So now people believe it needs to be dealt with even if he doesn't have the numbers to prove it. It is a manipulative way to convince you to change things.
And I'll create a new narrative based on what I'm missing.
This was in Anita's most recent Kickstarter update. After we released our episodes on the damsel in distress, several reporters at E3 asked Shigeru Miyamoto why he continued to use the damsel trope in many of his popular Nintendo games, and he said he hadn't really thought about it. It is a way to recruit others to help him create a new narrative based on what he is missing.
And I'll create a new narrative based on what I'm missing.
Sounding impressive. This man likes to make himself sound impressive. He will, for example, make things up.
So political remix video is just a term that I made up to try to describe a whole set of video works. They often will, video works that appropriate material from other sources without permission.
He invented that to make himself sound impressive.
So political remix video is just a term that I made up.
Even though he sounds impressive, he is nothing but a lazy man who likes to piggyback off other people's hard work and success. Another example is how he said his online videos have been recommended by Roger Ebert. This is what the tweet actually said. Donald Duck meets Glenn Beck. Wise to watch it now while it's still online. All Roger Ebert did was tweet the video, but by saying it was recommended, it makes McIntosh sound more impressive than he actually is. In reality, all he did was remix other people's work because he is lazy.
Studied extensively.
A way with words. I will admit, he does have a way with words. I think Anita Sarkeesian sums it up best.
While it may be comforting to think that we all have a personal force field protecting us from outside influences, this is simply not the case. Scholars sometimes refer to this type of denial as the third-person effect, which is the tendency for people to believe that they are personally immune to media's effects, even if others may be influenced or manipulated.
I read through about 2 months of his tweets straight one time. I did not fall into his trap, but I could see how those who are most susceptible to his type of language would get sucked into his rhetoric.
Paradoxically, and somewhat ironically, those who most strongly believe that media is just harmless entertainment are also the ones most likely to uncritically internalize harmful media messages.
As far as I'm concerned, anyone who follows Jonathan McIntosh suffers a severe case of third-person effect.
In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
Notoriety. He only has around 6,000 followers on Twitter. That is why he has a hashtag dedicated to him, #FullMcIntosh. That was invented to mock him. Most people do not take him serious. On the other hand, Anita Sarkeesian has over 250,000 followers. That is a lot more. It is in great part because Anita is far more likable and talks in a way that appeals to people. If McIntosh had so many hidden benefits, he'd be the more popular of the two, but he doesn't because he sucks and he's lazy.
Studied extensively.
Accomplishments. What are his real accomplishments? All he did was have 2 videos that were remixes of other people's work. His biggest video, Buffy vs. Edward, had just over 3.5 million views. His Donald Duck video has just over 2 million. Other than the Google Glasses video that has just under 1 million views, all his other videos have 40,000 or less. If you look at Anita Sarkeesian's channel, she only has 3 videos under 100,000 views. All her other videos have 100,000 or more. She has 3 videos over 1 million, and 3 that are over 900,000. Anita can do something McIntosh can't. It's called reproducing results. Anita worked harder than him, and she is more talented than him. All he did was run around talking about Donald Duck and Buffy because he sucks and he is lazy.
Studied extensively.
The reason he teaches about his method can be summed up with an old saying. Those who can do, and those who can't teach.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I want to welcome you to this seminar with Jonathan McIntosh from Rebellious Pixels.
McIntosh went around teaching because he can't reproduce. PewDiePie averages millions of views per video. Several YouTubers average hundreds of thousands to millions of views every video. McIntosh is nothing impressive. He just makes himself sound impressive. He is like the equivalent of a one-hit wonder who tours for the rest of his life on that one big hit he had. However, since him and Anita Sarkeesian ended up collaborating, it eliminated his need to obsess over his 2 viral videos. Agenda. McIntosh's real agenda is to re-educate people. If, for instance, you look at this ADL PDF, is Gaming a Boys Club. That is all about re-educating young people the way he envisions things should be through video games. Then this from the Kickstarter update PDF file. Plans for the future. Begin a new video series examining the representation of men and masculinity in video games. He is expanding the original curriculum to include something he views as an issue, toxic masculinity. From his Twitter, January 5th, 2015. So many toxic assumptions about violent masculinity here. You could write a thesis just about this game setting menu. Expand the organization by hiring new staff members. He wants to expand things so they can produce more content to re-educate people. Complete a rebranding of Feminist Frequency, including a new logo design and website. I'm not sure of all the details here, but it sounds to me like he wants it to appeal to a broader audience. Create Feminist Frequency merchandise. Notice how much they made last year? Almost $500,000. With merchandise, it means more money. Which leads into my next point, money. The reason he wants to raise money is because it takes money to do what McIntosh wants to do. It takes money to expand, hire people, and make new programs. With all the money and agenda in mind, I want to go back to when McIntosh first came on board with Feminist Frequency. This is what I'll call the game plan. For a while, Anita Sarkeesian built up her YouTube channel. Then she made her first set of Tropes videos, which garnered her a lot of attention. But it also was the foundation for what McIntosh wanted to do. Through her, he could have an audience to push his agenda because unlike him, she can reproduce results. The first time he was credited in one of her videos was the top 10 best non-violent video games as a research assistant. This is the first time Anita said this in a video.
If you enjoy these videos, please help keep Feminist Frequency going by donating today. Just visit feministfrequency.com/donate.
I've watched all her videos all the way through, and the first time I recall her asking for donations was when he came on board. Now think about the name, 10 Best Non-Violent Video Games. I'll first note games. What are they currently doing? Games. Non-violent? That has McIntosh written all over it. I will also note that Anita's hair is pulled back. While this was not the first time she pulled it back for a video, she has not let it down since. Ever since then, her hair is back in every video leading up to the Tropes versus Women in video games. Look at the clothes. Sweats. Plain old boring clothes. She even has a flannel shirt over here. Her attire went from varied and entertaining to plain and bland. Look right here, Lego Friends. She used to be all about movies and television shows. Then when McIntosh came on board, it shifted toward video games and toys. Look at another format, Lego 2 Parts. It's almost like the Lego series was a test drive for her Tropes series, although that is speculation. Now, I'm not going to break down every video, but I want to point out a few things about the first Lego video.
Lego is here. Hey, kids, look, a whole new world to build.
It starts with an audio file, much like her current Trope series starts with a piece of media.
Mario! Ah! Help!
That may not be much to think about on its own, But then she says this.
Research has consistently shown that playing with Legos accelerates childhood development.
Research consistently shows. That sounds familiar.
Research has consistently found that exposure to these types of images negatively impacts perceptions and beliefs about real-world women.
Anita started talking more heavily about research all of a sudden. Listen to this section.
Research has consistently shown that playing with Legos accelerates childhood development and is upheld as a gateway to math, science, and engineering fields, promoting spatial memory, spatial design, and of course, imagination. Sadly, as a consequence of LEGO's decision to design and market their products almost exclusively to boys over the past few decades, girls have been largely left out.
It is designed like the Tropes series, to educate people. Her videos may have always been meant to educate, but the format changed when McIntosh came on board. Then how it ended.
How did LEGO's products shift from its initial, relatively gender-neutral universal building experience to a more male-dominated, male-identified one? Well, it didn't happen by accident. Join me for part 2 of my LEGO and gender video series, where I'll dig into exactly how this happened, starting with a brief history of LEGO's TV commercials, including Zack, the LEGO Maniac. I'll also offer LEGO a couple of suggestions to fix their gender segregation problem.
The way that section is crafted is very similar to her Tropes versus Women in Video Games series.
I hope you enjoyed that video. It was probably my most ambitious project to date and took an enormous amount of time to put together. Please help keep Feminist Frequency going by donating today. You can visit feministfrequency.com/donate.
See how she was talking in a little box on the side while the credits rolled?
I would like to extend a big thank you to all of my backers on Kickstarter who have continued to support me and helped make this video series a reality.
Same format. McIntosh was setting Anita up from the get-go to do what he actually wanted to do, which was make a series of videos to re-educate people. And he has evolved her format and her into what he wanted. I'm not sure if he is the puppet master or if they walk hand in hand. It is possible she is a part of the game plan and not being manipulated. However, let's just assume for a second that Anita is a puppet. If that is the case, he is honing in on things personal to Anita. The first set of videos is about female representation in games. Anita is all about female representation because she is a feminist, so that affects her on a personal level. It had to be the foundation for McIntosh's agenda. He had to play to her on a personal level. But he just did 25 hidden benefits of men, and he is going to expand to male representations in games. He is expanding it to what he wants. Then the harassment narrative.
One, I'm going to do a research study about harassment that women face on YouTube as a way to funnel my anger and frustration at this.
She said that before her Kickstarter. Is it possible he honed in on the harassment because it was a personal thing to Anita? Is it possible the reason she went along with the harassment was in part because it affected her on a personal level? All I know is, having seen a lot of Anita's videos, she never used to be about harassment, just her work. Sometime after McIntosh came on board, it evolved into harassment. However, I am not a psychic. It could be that they both orchestrated the whole thing together. With everything I just said in this video, I want you to take a mental step back and look at the big picture. If you think this is all about female representations in games, you need to think again. His real agenda is about a complete restructuring. I'll defer to one of his most recent tweets. February 3rd, 2015. Gaming could be a perfect medium to help relearn values of empathy and compassion, but sadly, it's most often used to promote the opposite. To all you people out there that say they are in it for the money or that they are in it for the attention, you need to wisen up. This man, Jonathan McIntosh, has bigger plans than that. Much bigger. And he has been very patient in what he is doing. He'll do whatever it takes to get there. He is doing it through Anita Keesian because he can't do it himself. He uses games and aims them at kids because it is a huge market many kids take part in, and now he is trying to push it into the education system. If this nonsense gets too integrated into the schools, Jonathan McIntosh will end up getting his way. If you like this video, I have a playlist tackling Anita Sarkeesian and her work, and encourage you to check it out. It also includes reviews of her Tropes vs. Women in Video Games series.
I get a lot of support from people who really like my videos, and they've even been used as educational tools in classrooms. Educational tools.
I leave my audience with one question.
Oh, did I win?